So guys, let's talk about after action questions. What do we mean by that? So let's say there is something that you want to put into your subconscious. For instance, common one I used with myself was, is my grip how I want it to be? The way we can address this issue, if it's not fully subconscious, is by doing this. Let's say we're shooting an array in dry fire or live fire, it doesn't matter. And we are shooting and we get to the point where we finish the repetition. We're shooting some stuff, and we finish the repetition. Before you pull the gun off the target, leave it there and then ask yourself a few questions. So when I did this, what I would do is I would ask myself 3 questions. Is my support hand gripping as hard as I can? When you ask yourself that question in your mind, actually try to do it. So if you were not gripping as hard as you can, you'd actually be able to grip harder. Number 2, is my firing hand feel relatively comfortable for how I shoot? And I would put my attention on my firing hand and check how it feels. Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel too tense? Does it feel too loose for how I shoot? By doing that, you're checking this part of your grip. And the last thing I would ask myself would be, are my shoulders in a relatively neutral position? Meaning they're not too forward, they're not too hunched up, they're just comfortable. Over time, in the beginning, when you ask yourself these questions and actually try to do what it is that you're asking yourself, you will find that, yes, my firing hand will be too loose. And as a result of that, I'll tighten it. By giving yourself that feedback loop, by asking yourself the question and correcting it, over time will cause it to be subconscious. So you do that for a period of time, depending on how much you train. You get to a point where you're there and am I gripping as hard as I can? And you can't grip any harder. And that means the skill has become subconscious for you. So we talked about after action questions for the grip. Now let's talk about after action questions for transitions. When it comes to transitions, we want our vision leading the way for one, and we want to be target focused on all the targets that we are shooting. This way we get the most precision when it comes to where our gun is moving on the target. Common problem is people get sucked into their optic, they get sucked into their front sight, and they lose where they are on target, or their vision has to spot the target on the point on the target and then come back in to their optic, or, well, really not optic, but irons come back into their front sight. This is why I typically teach target focused shooting for all shooting, regardless of distance or difficulty. So the questions that we can do, that we can ask, we do our thing, we shoot some stuff, right? Stop on the target, the last target. Ask yourself, am I focused on the dot or the sight, or am I focused on the target? Check where you're focused. So if you're focused on the dot or the sight, put your vision back on the target. And now the second part of that is that if I am focused on the target, what specific spot am I focused on? Am I focused in the center of the alpha? Am I focused on the Alpha Charlie line? Am I focused on there a hardcover target? Am I focused on the edge of the hardcover? So by starting to pay attention to these questions, you're now allowing yourself to correct the things that are not working for you, or that are not subconscious yet, or that you want to address. And that is going to make a big difference in your target transitions as you get this subconscious. Now we talked about transitions, let's talk about movement real quick. So when it comes to movement, the questions I want to ask myself at the end, let's say I'm doing a exercise where I'm doing some shooting in a position entry, and I have a movement and a position entry. Finish up. Again, pause at the very end, and we're going to ask ourselves some questions, right? Am I in a position to move if I had to move right away? Okay, so in that case, for me, stance-wise, it's a little bit wider than shoulder width. My knees are bent and I'm sticking my butt out a little bit. So am I in a position that I can power to one leg or the other and get out of position quickly? And the things we're looking for in that regard is, are our feet too narrow, right? Meaning we really have to widen our stance a lot. Are our feet, are we not Are we not in a position where we can spring out pretty quickly, right? Knees too straight, for instance, right here. Now, my buddy Brandon Powers talks about what we call the power position, which is about a 45-degree angle from the shin to the femur, shin to the thigh. Now, that's a little bit different for everybody. So for me, I feel very comfortable about right here. This is probably not as low as some people would be, but this seems to be very powerful for me. And that goes back to my days when I would play basketball or volleyball and was a pretty athletic jumper. So I had a 40-inch vertical back in high school, and even into my 20s, before my motorcycle accident, I had a still 3-foot vertical leap. So this for me, very powerful position. Other people you might find are a little bit lower. This to me feels uncomfortable and I want to stand up, which can create tension. So find that position for you, but when you get to the end, okay, am I in a position to move out of where I am immediately? Check that out. If you're not low enough for you, get yourself in that position. So the idea is that we're starting to teach ourselves subconsciously. Consciously, we're programming it so that it becomes subconscious over time. Now you get to the point where you're here and you're in the position you want. Amazing. You now can move on to the next thing. Now to close that all off, this is an effective tool. It's a great feedback loop in order to give you the things that you want. You're paying attention. You're taking your conscious awareness at the end of your repetition. So while you're performing the repetition, you're trying to be observant of what's going on and correct it if it comes up. By doing this at the very end, you're giving yourself that immediate feedback loop. The quicker a feedback loop you can give yourself to correct the action and get the desired result that you want, the more likely it will become subconscious quicker. So guys, I hope you enjoyed those couple of tips. Give those a try and see what you guys think.